It was the tail end of October, and the air held that unmistakable autumn chill, crisp and laced with the scent of fallen leaves. My friends and I, Claire, her boyfriend Sam, Jess, Mike, and myself had been itching for a break from the relentless pace of our daily lives. We'd booked a cabin nestled deep in the mountains, a rustic retreat promising solitude, cozy evenings by the fire, and the kind of peace that only nature can provide. The plan was simple: a weekend to unplug, laugh, and recharge. We piled into Sam's SUV on Friday morning, our spirits high as we wound through narrow, twisting roads flanked by dense forests and sleepy hamlets. By noon, our stomachs were rumbling. So we stopped in a tiny town that seemed frozen in time. Its single main street was lined with a handful of weathered shops, a gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s, and a diner called Mabel's Eats. The diner had a faded, nostalgic charm with a neon sign flickering faintly in the window and a bell that jingled as we pushed through the door. Inside, the place was nearly deserted, just an elderly couple tucked into a corner booth, their heads bent over plates of meatloaf and a lone man perched at the counter. We slid into a booth near the window, our laughter echoing in the quiet space as we flipped through sticky, laminated menus, debating between burgers and pie. That's when I noticed him. The man at the counter wasn't eating or reading a newspaper. He wasn't even glancing at his phone. He was staring at us. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked onto our group with an intensity that sent a prickle down my spine. He was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, with a scruffy beard and a faded flannel jacket that hung loosely on his frame. His coffee sat untouched, steam curling lazily from the mug. At first, I tried to shrug it off. Maybe he was just curious about the noisy group of city folks invading his quiet town. But the longer we sat there, the more his gaze felt like a weight pressing down on us. Claire noticed it too, her foot nudging mine under the table. She shot me a glance, her eyebrows raised in silent question. What's his deal? I shook my head, unsure. Maybe he's just annoyed we're being loud, I whispered. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. There was something deliberate about the way he watched us, his eyes never wavering, even when the waitressy, middle-aged woman with a tired smile came by to take our order. Sam, always the one to break tension with a joke, raised his coffee mug in a mock toast. "Cheers, buddy," he called, grinning. The man didn't flinch. No smile, no acknowledgement, just that relentless stare. We hurried through our meal, the laughter dying down as the unease settled in. When we left, we tried to laugh it off, chalking it up to small-town suspicion of outsiders. "People get protective of their little corners of the world," Jess said as we piled back into the car. But the memory of those eyes lingered, a shadow we couldn't quite shake. By late afternoon, we reached the cabin, and it was everything we'd hoped for. Tucked into a clearing surrounded by towering pines, it had a wide porch with creaky rocking chairs and a fire pit in the yard. The trees were a riot of red, orange, and gold, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. The air was clean, sharp, with the scent of pine and earth, and for the first time in months, I felt my shoulders relax. We spent the evening unpacking, lighting a fire in the stone fireplace, and settling into the kind of easy camaraderie that only comes with old friends. The cabin was warm, the fire casting flickering shadows on the wooden walls, and we let ourselves sink into the moment. But that peace didn't last. After dinner, we gathered around the fire pit outside, roasting marshmallows and trading ghost stories, the kind that are more silly than scary. The stars were bright overhead, and the woods were quiet, save for the crackle of the fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. Then Mike froze, his marshmallow stick hovering midair. "Did you guys see that?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the tree line. "See what?" Claire asked, turning to follow his gaze. "There," Mike said, pointing toward a cluster of trees just beyond the glow of the fire. By that big pine, I swear I saw someone. We all turned, squinting into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing but shadows and swaying branches. But then there, a flicker of movement, subtle but unmistakable. A tall, human-like shape darted between the trees, too quick to make out clearly. My heart gave a sharp thud. Probably just a deer, Jess said, her voice light but strained, as if she were trying to convince herself as much as us. But the shape hadn't moved like a deer. It was too upright, too deliberate. The memory of the man from the diner flashed into my mind, unbidden. Those eyes, that stare, could it be him? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. It was ridiculous. Why would he follow us? But the unease had taken root, and the cozy warmth of the fire no longer felt like enough to keep the darkness at bay. We retreated inside, locking the doors and drawing the curtains. Sam and Mike tried to lighten the mood, joking about Bigfoot or overactive imaginations, but their laughter sounded hollow. We checked the locks twice before heading to bed, telling ourselves it was nothing, just the woods playing tricks on us. At 2 a.m., I jolted awake to the sound of footsteps on the porch. They were slow, deliberate, the wooden boards creaking under a heavy weight. My first thought was that one of my friends had gone outside for air, but then came a soft, rhythmic tapping on the living room window. My pulse spiked, and I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. I texted Claire, who was in the next room. "Are you awake?" Her reply came instantly. "Yeah, did you hear that?" I crept to her room, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. Together, we peered through a tiny gap in the living room curtains. The porch light cast a weak glow, barely reaching the edge of the yard. And there he was, the man from the diner. He stood just beyond the light, his silhouette stark against the darkness, staring at the house. His face was shrouded in shadow, but I knew it was him. The same flannel jacket, the same unyielding posture. We woke the others, whispering urgently. As we huddled in the hallway, Mike suggested confronting him, but Jess and I shut that down fast. If this man had followed us all the way here, he wasn't just some curious local. He was dangerous. We called the police, the dispatcher's calm voice assuring us an officer would arrive, but it would take at least 30 minutes. The cabin's remote location, once a selling point, now felt like a trap. Outside, the man hadn't moved. He stood like a statue, his gaze fixed on the house. Then, slowly, he began to pace, his boots crunching against the gravel. It was maddening, each step amplifying the tension in the room. Mike and Sam, restless and angry, couldn't stand it any longer. "We can't just sit here," Sam whispered, his jaw tight. "He's testing us." Mike grabbed a heavy flashlight from the coffee table, his knuckles white around it. "Stay inside," he told us. "Lock the door behind us." I wanted to stop them, to beg them to wait for the police, but the words caught in my throat. The door clicked shut behind them, and I turned the lock, my heart hammered. Through the gap in the curtains, we watched as Mike and Sam approached the man, their flashlights cutting through the dark. "Hey," Mike called, his voice steady but laced with tension. "What are you doing here?" The man turned slowly, his movements deliberate, almost predatory. "Just passing through," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like stones grinding together. "Didn't mean to disturb anyone." Sam stepped forward, his flashlight trained on the man's face. "Then why are you creeping around a private cabin in the middle of the night?" The man's lips twitched into a faint, unsettling smile. "Didn't know it was private," he said. But his eyes, those same intense eyes from the diner, darted between them, betraying his words. "You need to leave," Mike said, gripping the flashlight like a club. Now, for a moment, it seemed like the man might back down. He raised his hands, palms palms out and took a step back. But then his smile widened, and he glanced over his shoulder toward the side of the cabin. Jess gasped, her hand clutching my arm. Another shadow moved in the tree line, a second man. Barely visible in the dark, Mike and Sam saw him too, their bodies tensing. "We're not looking for trouble," Sam said, his voice faltering slightly. "Neither are we," the man replied, his tone mocking. "But you never know who you'll meet out here." Without warning, he lunged at Mike, who swung the flashlight, catching him in the shoulder. The man staggered, but didn't fall. At the same time, the second figure sprinted from the trees, closing the distance fast. Sam reacted, swinging his flashlight and hitting the second man square in the chest. The impact sent him sprawling, but he was quick to recover. "Get back to the cabin," Mike shouted, grabbing Sam's arm. They bolted for the porch, the two intruders scrambling to their feet behind them. Jess and I fumbled with the lock, throwing the door open just as they reached the steps. We slammed it shut, sliding a chair under the knob for extra security. The pounding started immediately, fists hammering against the door, followed by the crash of something heavy, maybe a log, slamming into it. The windows rattled as someone tried to pry them open, but the locks held. "Stay back," Sam yelled, brandishing the flashlight. "The police are coming." For a moment, the noise stopped. Then came low, muttered voices outside, too quiet to make out. Seconds later, the sound of footsteps faded into the night. When the police arrived, the men were gone. The officers searched the property and the surrounding woods, but found nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no sign of the suit. No sign of the intruders. I told them about the man from the diner, how he'd stared at us, but they could only nod and take notes. "Could be drifters," one officer said, "or locals messing with tourists. We'll keep an eye out." We didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle outside, set our nerves on edge. At dawn, we packed up and left. The beauty of the mountains, now tainted by fear. As we drove away, I couldn't stop wondering, why had he followed us? Was it just a cruel prank or something darker? The questions haunted me, and the answers felt out of reach. One thing was certain. The wilderness wasn't what scared me anymore. It was the people hiding in it. Eric and I had been counting down the days to our weekend getaway. Work had been relentless, and the promise of a secluded cabin in the woods felt like a lifeline. We found the perfect spot on a rental seated cozy cabin with a stone fireplace, a wraparound porch, and a hot tub overlooking a dense forest. The photos were idyllic, and the reviews glowed with praise. We arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. The cabin was even better in person, its wooden beams polished to a warm glow, the large windows reflecting the fading light. A handwritten note from the host welcomed us, urging us to relax and enjoy our stay. We unpacked, poured glasses of wine, and sank into the plush couch by the fireplace. The crackle of the flames and the soft hum of the forest outside lulled us into a sense of calm we hadn't felt in weeks. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing over old memories and planning a hike for the next day. But as Eric got up to refill our glasses, I noticed something odd, a tiny red light blinking in the corner of the living room ceiling. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. Eric squinted. "Probably the smoke detector. They've got those little lights, right?" "Yeah, but why is it blinking?" I pressed. Smoke detectors usually had steady lights, didn't they? He waved it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I tried to focus on the warmth of the fire, the taste of the wine, but my eyes kept drifting to that light. It felt wrong. The next day was perfect. We hiked through trails lined with towering pines, their needles carpeting the ground. We found a creek, its water clear and cold, and snapped photos until our phones were nearly out of storage. By the time we returned to the cabin, we were exhausted but happy, our cheeks flushed from the crisp air. Eric grilled steaks on the porch while I tossed a salad in the kitchen, the scent of charred meat mingling with the earthy smell of the woods. After dinner, we slipped into the hot tub, the warm water soothing our aching muscles as we gazed at the stars. For a moment, the world felt perfect. But that night, as I showered before bed, I saw it again, a faint blue light blinking behind the bathroom vent. My heart skipped a beat. I stepped out, wrapping a towel around myself, and called for Eric. He climbed onto the edge of the tub, shining his phone's flashlight into the vent. "There's something back there," he said, his voice tight. "It's not just a light. I think it's a camera." The word hit like a punch. A camera. In the bathroom, my mind raced, replaying every moment we'd spent in the cabin, every laugh, every kiss, every private second. Eric tried to pry the vent open, but it wouldn't budge without tools. "Let's check the rest of the place," he said, his face pale. We moved methodically, shining the flashlight into corners, behind picture frames, under furniture. In the bedroom, we found another blinking light, this time hidden behind a clock on the dresser. It wasn't a clock at all, just a shell concealing another camera. The smoke detector in the living room. Another camera, its lens peering. Through a translucent cover, panic set in. "We need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. "Now?" Eric nodded, and we packed in a frenzy, throwing clothes and toiletries into our bags. Every second in that cabin felt like a violation, as if unseen eyes were still watching. The thought of what those cameras had captured made my skin crawl. Less may crawl. Changing, sleeping, showering. Moments that were supposed to be ours alone, now stolen. We sped down the dark forest road, Eric on the phone with the rental site's emergency line. Their response was maddeningly calm, promising to look into it. I wanted to scream. This wasn't a billing issue or a broken appliance. This was a betrayal, a violation of our trust, our privacy. When we got home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those blinking lights, imagined someone watching us through. A scream. A week later, the police called. The property owner had been arrested. His cabin was rigged with a network of hidden cameras, all feeding to a central recording system. This wasn't his first offense. There were other complaints, other victims. The footage he'd collected was extensive, and the thought of where it might have ended up dark corners of the internet, private collections, made me sick. Even now, months later, I check every room I enter, scanning for lights, inspecting vents and clocks. Eric calls it paranoia, but he doesn't stop me. That cabin was supposed to be our escape. Instead, it taught us how fragile privacy can be, on how sinister the world can feel when you realize you're never truly alone. I'm an electrician, so I'm used to sizing up situations, quickly spotting the faulty wiring, the shady customer, the scam waiting to happen, or so I thought. When Natalie and I booked a cabin for a weekend getaway, I didn't think twice. She'd found it on a rental site we'd used before, and the listing looked perfect. A cozy 2-bedroom retreat by a lake, complete with a fire pit and a view that promised serenity. Work had been brutal for both of us, and the idea of 3 days with no emails or deadlines was too good to pass up. I even took Friday off to surprise her with an early start. The drive was easy, the kind of road trip that makes you feel alive. Open roads, good music, and a stop at a diner with the best apple pie I'd ever tasted. When we arrived, the cabin was everything the photos promised. It sat on a gentle slope overlooking the lake, its wooden exterior weathered but charming. A porch swing creaked softly in the breeze, and a stack of firewood waited by the door. The key was in the lockbox, just as the host had promised, and it turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar, with plush furniture and a massive stone fireplace that dominated the living room. We spent the afternoon exploring the property, snapping photos of the shimmering lake and the fiery autumn leaves. By evening, we were settled in. Natalie was in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables for dinner, while I stood on the porch, splitting firewood. The air was cool, the sky a deep indigo, dotted with stars. Then I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. An SUV pulled into the driveway, its headlights cutting through the dusk. My first thought was that it was the property owner, maybe checking on the place. But something about the way the driver moved, quick, purposeful, set me on edge. A stocky man stepped out, his face hard. Behind him, a woman and 2 kids stayed in the car, their expressions tense. "Can I help you?" I called, setting the axe down. "This is my property," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What the hell are you doing here?" I blinked, caught off guard. "We rented it for the weekend. I've got the confirmation email if you want to see it." His face darkened. "You rented it from who?" "Getaway Rentals," I said, pulling out my phone to show him. Natalie appeared at the door, her eyes wide with concern. The man shook his head. "This is my house. I didn't rent it to anyone." The woman in the car stepped out, her arms crossed. "You've got the wrong place," she said. "We live here." Natalie's voice was small, but the key worked, and it's exactly like the listing. The man's eyes narrowed. "You have a key." I held it up, and his expression turned icy. "Get out of my house now." Before I could respond, he reached into the car and pulled out a gun. Natalie gasped, and I stepped in. Front of her, hands raised. "Whoa, whoa. There's no need for that. You break into my house, and you think I'm just gonna let it slide?" he snapped. "You've got 5 minutes to get your stuff and leave, or I'm calling the cops." My mind raced as we scrambled to pack. How had this happened? The address was right. The key worked, but something was horribly wrong. As we threw our things into bags, I checked the rental confirmation again. Everything matched. Natalie was shaking, tears in her eyes, as we loaded the car. The man stood on the porch, gun still in hand, watching us as we pulled out. Natalie called the rental site. The truth came fast and brutal. The listing was a scam. The host had used photos from an old real estate listing, copied the key, and deleted the listing after we booked. We'd been set up, sent to someone's actual home. We found a motel for the night, but sleep didn't come. I kept seeing the man's gun, hearing the anger in his voice. What if he hadn't believed us? What if he'd pulled the trigger? We filed a police report, but the officers weren't optimistic. These scams were common, they said, especially with remote rentals. The rental site refunded us, but it didn't erase the violation, the fear. I couldn't stop wondering about the scammer. Had they known we'd face the real owners? Were they watching, waiting to see how it played out? The thought made my blood run cold. Now, I check every booking, obsessively cross-referencing addresses, researching owners, reading reviews. It takes time, but after that weekend, I'd rather be cautious than sorry. A getaway is supposed to be an escape, not a brush with disaster. I booked the cabin on a whim, desperate for a break from my soul-crushing job. A friend had recommended a spot near a lake, a couple of hours from the city, and the listing promised solitude and simplicity. It was exactly what I needed. No Wi-Fi, no noise, just me and the woods. The cabin was rustic but welcoming, with creaky floors, a small kitchen, and a living area that smelled faintly of old wood and campfires. I arrived in the late afternoon, the sun filtering through the trees, casting long shadows across the porch. I set up my laptop for movies, brewed a pot of coffee, and sank into the couch, ready to let the stress melt away. That night, as I watched a movie, I heard a faint creak from above. It was subtle, like the house settling, and I brushed it off. Old cabins make noises, right? But as the night wore on, the sounds grew harder to ignore, shuffling, deliberate, like footsteps in the ceiling. I muted the movie, my ears straining. There it was again, a slow, measured creak, then a soft thud. My heart picked up, but I told myself it was an animal. Raccoon, maybe? Still, the rhythm felt too human. I grabbed a flashlight and checked the cabin, testing every window and door. Everything was locked tight, no signs of disturbance. I went to bed, but sleep was elusive, the noises echoing in my mind. The next morning, sunlight flooded the cabin, and the unease faded. I spent the day hiking, snapping photos of the lake and reading on the porch. The tranquility exactly what I'd come for. But that evening, as I tidied up, I noticed something. Odd, a small square panel in the hallway ceiling, blending almost perfectly with the wood. It was an attic door. Curiosity got the better of me. I dragged a chair over, pushed the panel open, and pulled down a folded metal ladder. The attic was dark, the air stale. My flashlight revealed blankets piled in a corner next to a water bottle and a flashlight. Someone had been living here. Recently, my stomach twisted. Was it a squatter? A drifter? The cabin showed no signs of forced entry. So how had they gotten in? I checked the attic again, but it was empty. Still, the discovery gnawed at me. That night, I locked everything twice. The attic door sealed above me. But at 2 a.m., I woke to a heavy thud overhead. My heart pounded as I listened, definite footsteps moving across the attic. Then, the unmistakable creak of the attic door opening. I grabbed my phone and flashlight, my hands shaking. "Who's there?" I called, my voice cracking. No answer. I backed into the bedroom, locking the door, and called the cabin's owner. She sounded confused, insisting no one should be there. "Call the police," she said. "I'm on my way." I didn't wait. With my flashlight in one hand and my keys in the other, I grabbed my bag and sprinted to my car, the footsteps still echoing above. As I backed out, my headlights caught the attic window. A figure stared down at me, their face obscured. I drove to a gas station, waiting under the harsh fluorescent lights until the police called. They found the attic empty, the blankets gone. Whoever it was had vanished when they realized I'd seen them. The owner was horrified, mentioning occasional break-ins by vagrants, but nothing like this. The police promised to patrol the area, but it didn't ease the chill in my bones. I don't know who was up there or what they wanted, but I know I came too close to finding out. Now, I check every corner of every rental, and I never ignore a strange noise. The woods were supposed to be my escape, but they taught me to always look up. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, let me know how you'd handle being in one of these situations. Have you ever had a creepy travel experience? Share your thoughts and stay vigilant on your next adventure.